For 10 years now, James Lipton has been executive producer, writer, and host of Inside the Actors Studio. The show, a collaboration between the Actors Studio, the New School for Social Research, and the Bravo Network, gives actors an opportunity to talk about their career and their craft in front of a live audience of acting students. I'm pleased to have Jim Lipton back at this table to talk about his craft, his passion, his interest, and the 10 remarkable years he has had. He is a hero in France, as well as at the New School, and as well as for all those people who watch Bravo, because he brings actors to that table, to that forum, to talk about their career and their passion and why they have done what they have done. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
I take some small credit.
You should. When you say back at this table, you are saying something immense that your audience may not know. What they will know now is that both the Actors Studio Drama School of New School University and Inside the Actors Studio, which is a course in that school of which I'm dean, were born at this table. I do not exaggerate. What happened was, as you may recall, that when we began the school, it was my idea. A committee was formed. It was Paul Newman, Norman Mailer, Arthur Penn, Ellen Burstyn, Carlin Glynn. And when we realized that the state was going to give us accreditation, we said, my God, we've got to let the world know. And you invited us here. And we sat here, and you asked us questions. And then, about 2 weeks later, we opened our doors. In came the applications. At the bottom of every university application, it says, how did you hear about this course? And they all said, The Charlie Rose Show. Without you, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And also, there is the fact that once the school began, and my colleagues at the Actors Studio persuaded me to take the deanship and to launch it 10 years ago, we then had teachers who would teach 30 weeks. We had people like Arthur Penn and Ellen Burstyn who would come down and do 6 Fridays. I had one category left. That was people who could give me one night of their lives. I sent out the letters, said, would you come and teach our students at a seminar? And when Arthur Penn and Sally Field, Dennis Hopper, and Alec Baldwin, Paul Newman responded, I then sent word back into the community from which I had come. And I said, does anybody want to record this? Because they're liable to say something worth recording, and television cameras are expensive. We're a school. We can't afford it. Bravo said yes. It all began at this table, and I'm not kidding.
I accept paternity.
You're too young to be my father, but you should accept the credit. It is part of the miracle of this school. Today, we're the largest graduate drama school in the United States of America. Today, Inside the Actors Studios in 75 million American homes in Bravo and 125 countries, and we've had 8 consecutive Emmy nominations. Charlie, thank you.
Well,
from the bottom of my heart.
Congratulations. Tell me about James Lipton. I mean, how did he get to the point that he came to this table with the great hope of creating a drama school at the Actors Studio?
I was a member of the Actors Studio at that time for only 2 years. It was Norman Mailer and Norris Church who had dragged me over there, because I was trained by Stella Adler, by Harold Clurman, and by Bobby Lewis. And I did dance training and voice training, but not by Lee Strasberg. I was not a member of the studio. They had insisted at the wedding reception of George and Sarah Plimpton that I come over, and this is family tonight,
right.
that I come to the studio and see what was being done. And at that time, I had no time. I was too busy. And finally, after weeks of getting almost daily calls from them, I went over there. I became enamored of it. And I saw what they were doing. I then directed a play by Georges Feydeau, which I had translated and adapted with studio people, became a member of the studio. And when they asked me to join the board. I was at a board meeting, and like every cultural institution in America, we were thinking about closing our doors because we didn't have any bread. And that was when I woke up the next morning and said to my wife, Kedekai, who is a member of the board of governors of Parsons School of Design, her alma mater, one of the 7 divisions of the New School, I would like to call Jonathan Fanton. I knew Jonathan Fanton because I had attended a dinner as her spouse at which you were the guest of honor because you had conducted an evening on the subject of semiotics.
Right.
That's how I knew him. I called him and said, what if, at the stroke of a pen, one could restore to the new school something of the glory of Erwin Piscator, who came to the university in exile when that university in the 30s saved 200 artists and scholars from Hitler and created it there on that stage where we do our show. I said, what if I could persuade my colleagues at the Actors Studio to create a degree-granting program for the first time in then 47 years? And Jonathan Fatton said, where's the pen and when do I sign? And that's how the whole thing began.
Why has the Actors Studio on Bravo been successful?
I honestly don't know. First of all, I made two decisions, one of which was fateful and nearly fatal. That was that I would not have a pre-interview. And you know what that means.
Because I never do one.
Huh?
I never do. Right.
You have the scope to be able to discuss anything with anybody. What I did was I decided there would be no pre-interview. Therefore, that meant I had to do all my own homework. Now, I have been for 10 years a dean in the university, one of 7 deans of the new school. And I have a day job. Then at night I would begin working, and then on the weekends I would work, and I would do all of the homework that was necessary in order to put the show on the air. It meant leading a double life. The other thing that I decided at the beginning was that we would stick to craft. Now, I was worried that it would make the show arid and uninteresting to anybody but a few film and theater buffs.
Rather than what?
Rather than personal life, rather than gossip, rather than...
But you talk about personal life. You talk about where they went to high school and what influences they had. And
I have what I'm after on that show, and I hope it's not dissimilar from you because I watch your show and I'd like to be able to do what you can do. What I'm interested in is everything that shaped both the person and the artist who is sitting as far from me as you are now. Everything that brought the two of us to this point at this moment. And so, of course, it begins at the beginning. And in those shaping events, we have found, to our astonishment, that the door blew open on the most intimate moments, and I did not anticipate that. But if I were to ask you now about the 5 or 6 moments, occurrences, events, people in your life that shaped you, we would have the same, I think, situation.
What have been the lessons that you have learned in this 10-year journey?
First, how much I don't know. And second, I think it is that creative artists in my field, in film and theater and television, actors, writers, and directors, contrary to the public's view of them, are extremely private individuals who, when they come to us or when they come to you, are committing an act of such immense generosity that it's immeasurable by the public. They see the final result. They see a show. But what we see for 5 hours is Bob De Niro or Paul Newman, who was here with me, with you, or Kathy Bates, or Harrison Ford, or
Tom Cruise,
or Russell Crowe, or Barbra Streisand.
Yeah, how hard was it to get Barbra Streisand?
It only took 10 years. I'm serious.
What was her problem?
Well, she's private. She's private.
Yes.
And you know, look, these people, Charlie, are abused by many people. Not by you and not by me, I hope. But they are abused. They feel betrayed often. They'll say things that are twisted. They are targets. You know the world we live in. It makes them very wary. And I think that when they can come to an environment like this table or to our school where we're there with, those are students, those are master's degree candidates out there who are there for a very particular reason and who care a great deal, then the atmosphere is entirely different. And they entrust themselves. Barbara, well, I got Barbara through a very peculiar circumstance because at the Hampton Classic, jumping horses are one of the things I have done in this life, and I go to the Hampton Classic, and there was Donna Karan, and Donna Karan called Barbara on a Sunday morning in Malibu and said, Jim's here with me, and the two of us talked her into coming. She got on Whoopi Goldberg's bus because Barbara won't fly and drove across country and came and did my show. I bless her forever.
When did you record this?
In September.
Yeah.
And I finished the edit today, just before I came.
2 hours down to 53, whatever?
No, 5 hours down to 2
2
hours.
hours, right.
It's a 2-hour show on March the 21st. And I spent a lot of time on the edit because she gave me material she had to find it. It took months. She gave me extraordinary material, and it's all in the show.
She talked about everything.
Everything. She told me how, at the age of 15, she auditioned for the Actors Studio and got turned down. And I knew that, because, like you, you are a lawyer. I never finished the law, but I studied, and one of the only things I remember is from the art of cross-examination, never ask a question, the answer to which you do not already know. So I do all that. I've got 400 cards there. And I knew in that there were certain things about her that I exercised on the stage. One of them was that she had been turned down when she was 15 years old. I spoke to Ellen Burstyn, who, with Harvey Keitel and Al Pacino, those are the co-presidents of the studio. I'm a vice president of the studio. And Ellen wrote me a letter for her. And on our stage, as our audience will see, I say, "Dear Barbara, it has come to our attention that 46 years ago,
you applied,
and a mistake was made, and we hereby make you a member of the studio with all the privileges there and so forth." And I made her a member of the studio. She's a made person now.
All right. Oh, more about the Actors Studio in a minute, inside the Actors Studio.
Yeah.
You're clutching this, Sherry, the Broadway musical,
Am I
as if it somehow is precious for you.
Was it that
Let me
obvious?
read this. Sherry, the Broadway musical, book and lyrics by James Lipton. Music by Lawrence Rosenthal, based on The Man Who Came to Dinner by Moss Hart and George Kaufman. Executive producer James Lipton. Produced by Robert Sher. World premiere cast. Tell me about Sherry.
Once upon a time, when the earth was covered in mists, in 1967, when I was a brothel boy, I wrote my second Broadway musical. The show had an interesting history, to say the least. We went out of town to Boston to open the show with George Sanders, perfect casting. And we were the fair-haired boys. Everybody had heard about the score, and everybody said it was going to be a big hit. In Boston, I was summoned one night at midnight, not midnight quite, maybe 11 o'clock, to the theater. We hadn't opened yet. And I ran across the Boston Common in the snow, from the Ritz-Carlton to the Colonial Theater, because George Sanders, to whom I had taught the score, was in his dressing room and would not speak to anyone else. I knocked on the door, he let me in, he was sobbing. I've seen George Sanders cry, because he had been told that afternoon that his wife, Benita, had only 3 months to live. And she had been with us all the time. He'd been learning the score. I knew her, too. We had to get him out of the show. We opened with a skeleton of a show while we tried to recast. We were a catastrophe in Boston. And then we had to open with him again in Philadelphia, with a show that had been cut down to nothing because he was in such an awful state. He might have been wonderful in it. We'll never know. In any event, we finally recast it in about 2 weeks. We prepared it for New York. We came into New York. We failed. Almost succeeded. The score got terrific reviews. We didn't succeed. When a show closes on Broadway, the next morning, the set is offloaded to trucks, taken to New Jersey and burnt. The score, which is all of the tens of thousands of pages of orchestration, is kept in the books of the musicians on their stands, taken out of the pit, put into a trunk, and sent to your publisher, in our case, to Warner Chappell. About a month later, I called Warner Chappell with what would be the first of more than 100 offers of productions of Sherry. And I said, okay, open the trunk and copy the score and send it to the new producer. And they said, what trunk? The only conclusion we could come to after 3 months of searching was that it had been put on the wrong truck and burnt in New Jersey. Now we have a montage of leaves falling off a calendar. 10 years, 20, 30 years go by. And this fellow, Robert Sher, calls me and says, listen, I heard a pirated tape of Sherry. In those days, when a show was closing, probably members of the gay community, God bless them, would go in with Wallen sacks in their laps and wheel to, and they would record it. Well, you can barely hear the show. You mostly hear the audience. But anyway, he'd heard that. He said, it's a great score. I said, please, this wound has healed. Leave me alone. It's over. He said, why doesn't Larry Rosenthal redo it? I said, are you kidding? He's writing movies, getting Oscar nominations. Forget it. But I couldn't get it out of my head. Then Bernadette Peters was on Inside the Actors Studio. Bernadette, her husband, my wife, and I went to dinner. And I said, you know, I told her the story.
Probably at Elaine's.
No, it wasn't at Elaine's that night, oddly enough, though usually that's where we wind up, as you well know. In any event, I told her the story, and she said, God, I'd love to hear the score if you ever get it, if you ever redo it. Then I ran into Nathan Lane a couple of weeks later on New Year's Day 2000 at Betty Comden's New Year's Day party. And I told him the story. He said, love to hear it. He hadn't done producers yet. He was doing The Man Who Came to Dinner on Broadway. Right. Then I went backstage to see Carol Burnett. Also, she is an alumna of our show. And I told her the story. She said, I'd love to hear it. I called this guy and I said, you've ruined my life. The wound is open again. Now I could cast it if I had something to play for them. And if they liked it. But I have nothing. So thanks for nothing. He said, you know, the great repository of the American Musical Theater is the Library of Congress. I know the curator. Maybe there are a few sheets of music. Under these circumstances, Larry might be inspired to begin again. I said, it would take him forever. He'd never get it. Forget it. I hung up. 2 hours later, he called me, and he said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, it's there, Jim. The trunk is there.
The trunk is there.
In the Library of Congress, unopened in 33 years. And it had been sent there long since. Nobody knew it, along with Gershwin and Kern and Porter scores. We took it out the summer of 2000. We put it back together as it has never been seen, never been heard. And at my home with my wife, Kedekai, Larry played the piano, and I sang the score, played all the parts. And we had 100 people one night, 100 people the next, and they all said yes. Nathan Lane said yes. Carol Burnett said yes. Bernadette Peters said yes. Tommy Tune said yes. Ultimately, Mike Myers came in to do a wonderful cameo of Harpo Marx. That's banjo in the show. And we then went, EMI Angel Records, Bruce Lundvall is the president of Angel. He said yes. We went to Europe. We went to Bratislava and recorded the new orchestrations in our Stars Keys with 52 musicians, and then went to Prague and added more and did 67 musicians, brought it back, recorded the whole thing with our cast, and it is in the stores now. It's been in 2 weeks, and at Tower Records, which is one of the central posts of that company at Lincoln Center, we have been in the top 5 the first 2. Our cast album of Sherry has been in the top 5.
Back to the Inside the Actors Studio.
Yes, sir.
Brando will not come.
No, he calls me. He calls me. One day I was upstairs at the legal office of the university doing my decanal duties, and my assistant called and said, you better come down here. Somebody's been holding for 15 minutes. So I came down. And I said, who is it? She said, he says he's Marlon Brando. I said, why don't you tell him to call back? He said, no, he'll hold. I go, hello? I knew him years ago when I first came to New York. And I said, hi, Marlon, what's up? He said, hi, I'm never going to do your show. I said, in that case, Marlon, why are you calling me? We live similar lives. Anyway, he said, why do you want me on your show? You want for the greater glory of your show? I said, no. I said, we have some wonderful people who are just as famous as you, and we're cool. And he said, I said, why do I? I said, because you want to know the real answer. I said, yeah. I said, because you're the best actor I've ever seen in my life, period.
What is it he did that changed everything? Because everybody tells me that.
What he did was he found within himself a resource that other actors hadn't tapped as deeply before. Look, he was trained by Stella Adler. I was trained by Stella Adler. I know what his training was. I know what she taught him, what she taught all of us. She was a great teacher, the greatest teacher I ever had in my life. And Marlon look, Stanislavski said, the purpose of technique is to free the talent. You can't teach talent. Talent is what the individual brings to the table. In our school, we teach technique to actors, writers, and directors. And each person will rise to the level to which his talent will take him or her. And Marlon brought this incendiary talent. You can't explain talent. Willie Mays could never tell you how he batted a ball. Ted Williams could.
Well, I could catch it like this.
Right. But Ted Williams could tell you how he did it because he did it methodically. Right. But Willie Mays is a genius. Geniuses don't have to explain. They don't understand.
Well, I'd be prepared to argue that Ted Williams was every much a genius as Willie Mays.
No, I understand. But Ted Williams was a man who methodically, by his genius, taught himself to do what he could do. Willie Mays never, he didn't do it. He just did it. Right. He would say, get up there and swing at the ball, right? Well, genius but when you combine powerful technique rigorous technique, and I believe in the Stanislavski system as a technical system. It's marvelous.
You combine rigorous technique with
individual talent, and then you get a transcendent talent like Marlon, and something happens. He couldn't have done it if he had not trained with Stella Adler, because talent can wallow. Talent can just go a glimmering.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have, it isn't a question of, see, people think that actors need the opportunity. That's balderdash, because you can have the greatest opportunity in the world, and if you can't deliver, nothing will happen.
There is, your parents split, did they?
Yes, they did.
And that was a powerful, what?
It was formative. You sound like me. You sound like Charlie, but it's a question I often ask. No one's ever asked me before. My father left. My father had tremendous influence on me. My mother was a teacher. Both are deceased. My mother was a teacher and a librarian, brilliant woman. And the influence on me from birth was amazing. I mean, it was probably ridiculous. I could read when I was 1.5. I wrote when I was 3. I wrote 3 novels when I was 12. When my father left, there was just my mother and me. And there were hard times, very hard times. My father was a practicing poet. Imagine how much money we had when my father, the poet, was around. And then when he was gone, imagine what was left. I mean, I can remember, I hate this, I'm running a poor mouth, but I can remember when we ate rice and drank water to fill our stomachs when I was a child. And I had to begin working very, very early. I've worked from the age of 13. And oddly enough, the influence that it had on me was the following. I worked because I had to support myself. I had to help support my mother. I was going to school. I was going to the university. And the easiest way for me to earn money and do my homework, to have the time for it all, was to act. Because I was an amateur actor in the Catholic Theater in Detroit. Somebody saw me and said, here's a job for you. And then they got me a job as a kid on the Lone Ranger, the famous radio. I was the Lone Ranger's nephew, Dan Reed. Didn't know that, did
No,
you?
I didn't.
And he used to say, "Hi, Silver," and Tonto would say, "Get him up, Scout." I'd say, "Come on, Victor." My voice
That was you.
changed.
Come on, Victor.
That wasn't me. But the point is that because my father left, because I had to work, eventually I found my way into acting as always, as a means of subsidizing my education. That was my only purpose. And then when I came to New York and I was going to finish the law, I realized the track was very fast and that I wouldn't get any work as an actor. I wouldn't be able to support myself. I wouldn't be able to go to school. And so I walked into a room one day, and there was a woman named Stella Adler. And I began studying, and it was bye-bye to the law. And it was hello to everything else that I've done since then.
Because?
Because she was the most inspiring teacher I ever had in my life. And because what she said made such sense to me, and because there was something in me, obviously, that wanted to emerge in this direction. And eventually what it did was, I studied 2.5 years with her, 4 years with Harold Clurman, 2 years with Bobby Lewis, and I studied ballet, I studied modern dance, I studied voice up to the operatic level. I was putting it all together, and what does all that add up to? Musical theater.
Roll tape. This is some of the answers from what's called the Bernard Pivot Questionnaire.
Oh, good.
Here it is.
Oh,
That was Sally.
That was Sally Field.
She was the first?
But she was the first who really got hold of the Bernard Pivot Questionnaire.
Yeah.
She was like my third guest, and she set the tone for the next 10 years. After she said what she said, everybody cut loose, except the men, who won't give me anything. The women.
Women are much better
Katie
than men.
Barth.
Why is that?
They're braver than we are. They have to have babies.
Yeah.
They can take more pain, and they're just plain braver than we are.
You have gone through this with. How did you originate this? Bernard Pivot, for everybody, used to do the most popular television program on Friday night. I think it was Friday night.
Friday night it was. The restaurants used to stay closed until he was off.
In which he'd sit around in a kind of semicircle, circle, and people would come to Paris, and they would sit and they would have a book or a play, or they would have some other reason for being there, and they would have a vital discussion
exactly.
about.
The first 16 years or so was Apostrophe,
right,
which was only authors. Imagine. And it was the most popular television program in France. Imagine that. What a joy. And then he went to a new format called Bouillon de Culture.
Yeah, I never quite got that.
Well, it's books, and it's also the art, all the arts, and
Right.
and politics. He had Mitterrand on days before Mitterrand died.
Oh, he died?
Huh?
Right before he died?
Yeah, he had him on like 5 days before he died.
wow.
He was Charlie, with all due respect to you, and I think you are the best, I think, in America, but I think he's the best in the world. He is a man of such consequence and of such intellectual rigor and of such breadth like yours. And he's had such an extraordinary roster. Anyway, I used to watch him on CUNY here, up at 75 or something.
Yeah, right.
And it was only in French. There were
Cable 75.
no subtitles. And the first time I saw it, I fell in love, and then I was addicted to it. And then that was Apostrophe, and then he went off with Apostrophe. I was in mourning. Then he came back with Bouillon de Culture, and I was back in harness watching the show. Anyway, when this show started, when Inside the Actors Studio started, I suddenly had an idea, and that was that I would ask the questionnaire that he asks. I would translate it into English and ask it on my show. Why? So that at the end of every show I could say, and now the Pivot questionnaire, adapted by Bernard Pivot, the greatest talk show host in the world, so that somebody, someday in America, would hear me say that and say, gee, I'm going to pay to have subtitles put on his show on CUNY so that everybody can enjoy this genius. Okay, this went on for years. Then, after about 8 years, when our show was now so popular in France, I got a letter one day, hand-delivered and handwritten in French from him. I thought he was going to sue me. No, it was an extraordinary letter. He said extraordinary things about the show, extraordinary things about me. He said I had made him the envy of every journalist in Europe. And then he said, as you may know, I'm going to be leaving the air after 26 years. Would you do me the honor of being my final guest? Well, let me tell you, it was not quite as big as the moment he called me and said, Sherry's been found, but it was enormous. And then he said, like you, I have refused to answer the questionnaire for 26 years. I had refused for 7. I would always say, no, only to Pivot. And he said, if you will come on my show, I will conclude my career on television by answering the questionnaire, if you will answer the questionnaire. I went to France. I was there from Wednesday till Sunday. On the Friday night that we did the show, on that Friday, my wife and I and friends were walking past a kiosk in Paris, and this friend of mine said, Jim, I think you better take a look. There was Le Monde, to my mind, the finest newspaper in the world. The upper right-hand corner, the story in the upper right-hand corner of the front page, was a picture of the two of us, and tonight it said, Lipton and Pivot meet. Well, I was on the show. He had a Nobelist. He had 2 members of the Académie Française. He had Annie Cohen-Solal was sitting next to me. He had 12 people, and most of the show was between him and me. And he was on. They let him stay on the air as long as he wanted, 3.5 hours. And at the end of the show, he answered the questionnaire, and I answered the questionnaire. Jean Dormasson of the Académie Française asked each of us the questions in turn, and for the first time, then I put it on my 100th episode here, and I thought, what a good joke, because I said at the beginning of it, to my public, now you're going to hear me answer the questionnaire, but it was in French. We were both speaking French, so I fooled them.
Congratulations on Sherry. Congratulations on what happened to you. A remarkable experience for anyone in a profession to be so honored by one you admire so much. Congratulations on the Actors Studio. Congratulations on all that you will do in the future.
Charlie, I thank you very much for this opportunity. I was here 10 years ago, and I am so honored to be here now. I can't tell you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.